Top Med Talk.
Well, hello and welcome to Top Med Talk. I'm Desiree Chappell, your host, and we are delighted to speak with our special guest today about the COVID vaccine and the perspective from the frontline providers during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, our guests today are both CRNAs, or Certified Registered Nurse Anesthetists, for all of our non-US listeners. You may have heard of what a CRNA is before, because I myself am a CRNA that I've been practicing here in the US. So I'm really excited to hear and share their perspective of providers on the ground, in the operating rooms, in the ICUs, dealing with this crisis every day, and to share it with our Top Med Talk network. We know as healthcare providers, through conversations just like this is how we've been able to disseminate a lot of information and just, hear from others about what's happening, and it kind of helps us in our own everyday practice. So we're delighted to host this conversation today. Now, unfortunately, my co-host, our editor-in-chief, Monty Mythen, who lives and works in London as a critical care doctor, is unable to join us because of previous commitments. And as many of you have been hearing, COVID's really starting to kick off in the UK as well. So I know a lot of NHS workers were hoping that they were going to be able to get through the holidays, and all of us over here in the US too. So Monty, our prayers and thoughts go out to you guys over there and everyone across the world right now who's dealing with this over the holidays. Now, it's with great pleasure that I introduce our guest today. And first, I want to introduce Jordan Rohrich, who is a CRNA, like I said, from Fargo, North Dakota. Hi, Jordan. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Tell me a little bit more about yourself, Jordan, about what your practice looks like up there in North Dakota and what's been happening on the ground.
Sure. So I'm currently practicing at Sanford Health, or Sanford Medical Center in Fargo, North Dakota. We're a level 1 trauma center that tends to get all the high security patients across North Dakota. We're kind of that mecca in terms of hospital care. COVID related, the first wave that everyone was supposed to experience back in April, we really didn't see, thankfully. We saw our wave mid-November. So about a month ago, where I was just pulling up some stats here. It looks like we had like 9,000 positives a day. Our census was, 3-4 times our normal capacity in our ICUs. So it was hectic. It was exactly how, we were reading about in New York and other places, and we're preparing for. So it's been a challenge, just like everyone else has experienced.
Yeah. Well, Jordan, we have a lot of international listeners and people from around the country that may not know much about Fargo. I know there was a movie about Fargo once, and for a long time, that's all I knew. But tell us a little bit about what the demographic looks like there, the size of your town, the size of your facilities there, and just paint a little picture about Fargo.
Sure. Yeah. So we're rural. We're a flyover state in the heart of the Midwest, even though we're on the northern edge. We are the best Dakota. Don't let South Dakotans tell you otherwise. But in terms of size, I think the surrounding area with all the, smaller town suburbs, if you will, it's around, 350,000, 400,000, like we had talked about before. And our hospital, I want to say it's around a 350 bed hospital. But like I said, we pull from a very large geographical area. So we're very busy.
Yeah.
I guess it's good and bad in terms of, we're able to provide access to care for patients. Yeah. But at the same time, when it's, COVID pandemic, not so good.
A little bit more difficult. Well, Jordan, we have one of your colleagues here that you work with there in Fargo. We have Jordi Idso, who is a CRNA there as well. Jordi, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Jordi, I think you're now famous in the CRNA community for being one of the first people in Fargo to receive the COVID vaccine.
Yeah, I got an email Monday morning that these vaccines were available to us. And I looked, and the first time was 1:00. I didn't think that was the first actual slot for the whole hospital, but I wound up down in the basement waiting for my vaccine, and the New York Times happened to be there. So it was an honor. It was an unexpected honor, but it's exciting. It's an exciting time for our healthcare system, exciting time for the U.S. and the world. Hopefully a step in the right direction with this pandemic. Hopefully a pathway is available here for this thing to come to an end, or at least get it under control.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about the vaccine here in just a little bit, but I wanted to kind of get your perspective. Jordan had mentioned that you didn't see much of a first wave, but obviously you were hearing a lot about, the rest of the world and what was happening and had a lot of time to prepare for this wave. Talk us through a little bit of, what you all did to prepare for this, knowing kind of that, numbers were starting to go up in your area.
Yeah, I mean, we had multiple meetings, especially on the administrative level, of how we would handle this. And like Jordan, a colleague, said too, we have opened several different units now to allow for an influx of these COVID patients. So I think they've opened basically 4 new wings in the hospital that weren't previously being used. So they had to staff all that, get it set up with equipment, beds, just things you don't think about. It's a lot that goes into those things. And frankly, on more of a statewide level, we actually opened up the Fargo Dome was going to be used, which is one of our athletic facilities. It was kind of an absolute disaster plan. So we had discussed everything, from very small insurgence of patients to this huge pandemic, which is kind of what, we were seeing things from New York, which was obviously very scary for everybody. And we were certainly no exception to that. But when you see things like that, I think it makes you think on this huge full-scale level. Fortunately for that first wave, we didn't see that in Fargo. The summer was, again, fairly quiet. We had a nice kind of trickle in, so to say, of COVID patients. And then this fall, like middle of November was really when it hit us pretty hard. So,
yeah. And it's always, it seems like in the recent months that rural America has just been hit so hard. Did you feel like all the preparation that you did kind of, you were ready to go, or was it still kind of, difficult to deal with?
That's a good question. I think, we felt like we were ready to go, but you're never truly going to be ready to go for these scenarios. It's just such a disaster that we've never seen before. There's nothing has ever happened in the U.S. like this. So it's hard to be truly prepared for this when you have nothing really to fall back on. The 1925 flu pandemic, there's not data. There wasn't, things are handled a lot differently now because we have the ability to handle it. And so I don't think you'd ever truly be prepared for it. I felt like we did as best we could.
Yeah.
And we're continuing to learn each day from our experiences.
Yeah, that's a very fair point, Jordan. I think that, it is kind of a learning process. It seems like this has changed a lot and kind of morphed over the year about, the treatment modalities, even the patient acuities and how, what we do for them. Do you feel like, because I kind of felt like this personally, that we kind of let our guard down just a little bit in the fall, even though, in our area, we had seen kind of a little bit of a first wave and then really got hit again in the fall as well. But I feel like, we just kind of let our guard down a little bit on this.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that's just a normal human response to when you're not seeing it day in and day out. You're not seeing what you're reading about other parts, what's happening in other parts of the country. So absolutely, I think we fell victim to that just a little bit. I think, though, now knowing what we know and what we've seen, I think our community has banded together and I think we're all in it. There's really no other way, right?
Yeah,
so
no,
we're all in
absolutely.
it to get through this.
Yeah.
And the vaccine is a great first step.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just briefly before we go on to that, tell me about the collaborative efforts that you guys have seen there in your facility. I mean, this is kind of an all hands on deck, and that's how these programs have been most successful. Jordi, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. So I think the collaborative work between us, our anesthesiologist cohorts, our respiratory therapists, ICU nurses, intensivists, everything has been, we're doing as best as we can. I feel like we've really, the last few weeks when the pandemic here was as bad as it was, we had really streamlined our process. I felt like everything was relatively efficient. We had, staff to care for these patients, and it's just tough. Every hospital system in the U.S. is trying to dip into the same resource pool to get ICU nurses, physicians, anesthetists, anything alike. And those pools dry up eventually, especially when there's that much need for the work. Yeah. But I feel like we've really, towards the end there, and I don't know if Jordan can attest to this, we had a pretty good process of how we would do things, and I think everybody's being utilized fully. I think we're all tired from our efforts the last 6 weeks here in North Dakota, especially, but the whole year has been taxing, and you can attest to that also. But I think
the elevated stress level,
yeah, I mean,
just like the onslaught.
Everything's just ramped up to a certain degree. Right away this spring when stuff was coming, even out of China, and then it had got down to the West Coast, and it kind of made that wave from west to the east. Everybody was nervous, and us, me too. Going to work was just going to work was nerve wracking. You didn't know what to expect. And then, like Jordan said, I think we did let our guard down maybe a little bit because we had such a nice summer and a lull, so to speak, and everybody was, hey, this is going okay, and then it really hit us again in the fall. So but yeah, I think the collaboration between our whole departments, everything was put aside because we knew there was a greater good we were trying to achieve here, and it's hard, and there's so many people in need of our services that we felt like we did as best as we could.
Jordi, of course, has gotten his vaccine. You've gotten yours now too?
Yes. Yep. I wasn't one of the first like Jordi, but a day later.
You let him go first, huh?
Yeah.
No. Well, let's talk about the vaccine for a little while because, obviously we know it's, was an emergency approval. We got it. It really has been amazing how it got out to the facility so quickly and was approved. And it seemed like a lot of facilities across the country did streamline the process to get these vaccines in place. And I fortunately as well got my vaccine on Wednesday in Louisville. So it's really been interesting to see how all that has panned out and worked. But let's talk about, first of all, in your all's facility, when it came down to kind of deciding who was going to get it, did you feel like in anesthesia that it was something that, was going to be offered immediately, or was that something that you had to discuss with your facility directors?
We had a good plan in place. Our, administration leadership, identified the specialties that were going to benefit the most and would actually need that, right away, and prioritize who got it. Anesthesia was part of that. Thankfully for us, I view it as a privilege to get the vaccine, of course. But, our emergency staff, our intensive care staff, Jordi had mentioned respiratory therapy. And I do want to give them a shout out too. That's one specialty that maybe a lot of people kind of like anesthesia maybe don't think of. Boy, they really have stepped up as a profession during this pandemic. But yeah, in terms of allocation and, who's going to get it, we were made aware that, yes, we would be one of the first.
Yeah, that's good. I do like how you say it really does feel like a privilege to be some of the first providers, to have received this. Now, in our community of not just anesthesia, CRNAs, this is one thing that I've been hearing a lot about, and there's so much talk about it, deciding whether or not you're going to take it. Now, of course, it's everyone's personal choice. Absolutely. But do you feel like that was, what's the discussion, I guess, around in your all's department? Do you feel like there's many people want to get it, or, there are a lot of people kind of lagging, or they don't want it at all? Jordi, what do you feel like?
I feel like there's always a discussion just with, the timeline that it was produced on. It's going to bring those questions about. As a department, I'd say for the most part, we've had a fair amount of our providers that have gotten vaccinated already. And actually, it's happened quick. And Jordan can maybe attest to it too, but I feel like most of us looked through the data and felt comfortable with it. Certainly, it's an individual choice, whatever you prefer to do. And there's, could never argue with that choice. But a lot of us see it as a way that potentially we can get out of this thing and go back to some sense of normalcy, whatever that normalcy will be, we'll find out. But we're certainly looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a quote, I think, in the Times article that you were featured in, or your picture was in, and it said "a shot at hope." Yeah. And I don't know about what it felt like at your all's place, but in our facility, like with my colleagues and everyone in the, anyone that got it, and even like the area in the conference room where we were receiving them, it was just like, it's just this lift, this mood, that everyone, it's just very different than what we felt this year at all. And it just was so lifted. And I felt like people are really seeing a ray of sunshine, though we don't, there's a lot of known unknowns about the vaccine and if it protects other people and not just us, if we were to get it and that whole conversation. But gosh, it just felt good.
Yeah, I agree. There was almost a palpable emotion in the basement of this large hospital facility that we have. There were some people in tears. I had our infectious disease guy spoke, and he got choked up just speaking about it. Being able to give not only us but our patients some sort of ray of hope. That maybe we can feel safe and see our families more frequently, and just things that we've taken for granted for years now that have been taken away from us. It's exciting to hopefully be able to do some of those things again.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Jordan?
Yeah, to kind of piggyback on that, how many vaccination blitzes do you see people walking in with a big smile, right?
Right.
Like, you don't see that too often. So
I
yeah,
gotta go get the flu.
Right. Yeah. Jordi hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, very special moment, very exciting time. Hopefully we can kind of get this herd immunity or something similar to that going and get back to some normalcy.
Yeah. Well, the question I'm dying to ask, has either one of you had any side effects from the vaccine? Jordi, I'll let you go first.
No side effects. My arm hurt the next day for about 8 to 10 hours or so. I didn't have any body aches, fevers, chills. I was fortunate not to have any adverse effects, or I felt great.
Yeah. So, how about you, Jordan?
No problems here.
Yeah, same here. I will say I actually didn't feel the injection itself. It was actually a nursing student. They had a bunch of nursing students do their IM, get their quotas.
Right? It's a little worried.
It's perfect for them. They do hundreds in a day. But I was kind of teasing. It was Bryce. It was his name. The student nurse that gave me mine, and I actually didn't feel it at all. He's putting the Band-Aid on. I'm like, oh wow, that was great. And then I was talking with Jordi. I'm like, how'd yours go? And he said the exact same thing, but he had his the day prior, and he's like, hey, I just look out. That arm gets pretty sore. I'm like, I'll be fine. And the next day I messaged him like, you weren't kidding. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it does. My arm was. I lifted up to point something on the monitor. I was telling something, and I was like, ooh, gosh, that hurts.
Right.
But you know what I did? It wasn't a study. It was something I saw my kids watching. They were saying that if you're smiling and you're like in a really good mood, like things don't hurt as bad, like the pain isn't there. And I swear to God, I think that's what it was. Like everybody, everyone's smiling. Everybody's so excited to do this. It's like, maybe it just didn't feel as bad. I don't know. My flu shot always hurts a lot worse than that. My TB shot or my TB test does. That's so funny. Well, guys, I really want to say thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us here. In the final kind of closing moments, we don't know if the vaccine, how long it's going to last and if it does protect, others, or if we can still spread it if we have it. One of the really important things that I think we discuss is how are you going to continue to make sure that we are safe with with our patients and with our colleagues, because we know, a lot of the spread in the second wave has seemed to come from community acquired as well as, in between our coworkers. Jordan, do you want to take that one? Jordi? Go ahead, Jordan.
Yeah. So I will say first off too, getting the vaccine as an anesthesia provider, not only kind of like, we're walking the walk kind of thing. We're showing that we're there for the community and our patients, especially as nurse anesthetists. And I think just that it kind of just personifies that, hey, there's this vaccine that we can get to try to get through this together. And if we all come together and do this, maybe we'll get through this. And I think we really will. I don't have a crystal ball in front of me, but yeah. And the second part of your question, remind me again.
Oh, I was just asking about how we're going to protect each other as we still are trying to deal with the vaccine. Yeah.
So we're still going to keep all the measures that we know that work in place. We're going to wear a mask. We're going to wash our hands. We're going to use the PPE appropriately in those situations that require it. And I think just day in and day out, grinding this out and until we see kind of a trend, a downtrend across the country, couple that with, people getting vaccinated, I think that's really all we can do right now. And just keep working hard at that and keep providing, exceptional care for our patients.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jordi, in closing, I mean, CRNAs, we've been in the trenches, right, through all of this. And how do you see that? Do you feel like we've kind of now, kind of gone into this whole another world of what CRNAs, provide, and talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think the word that comes to mind for me is just pride. I'm proud of our department. I'm proud of how we've managed this. It's been hopefully a once in a lifetime event here. I can only hope. I mean, I don't know certainly don't want to go through it again, but I feel like we've answered the bell.
Yeah.
I feel like we've done what we need to do for our communities, for our families, for our patients. And like I said, I'm just so proud of how we've handled all this pandemic.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your very busy day to talk with us here on Top Med Talk. I can't wait to share this story with the world because I think it's just so important to hear from hear all perspectives. And that's how we all grow and that's how we all learn. So thank you very, very much for that. And just going to give you one more opportunity. Shout outs to colleagues, friends, family, anybody for the holidays. Jordan?
Sure. I'll give a shout out to my wife, Michelle, and my two girls, Riley and Reese. Outside of that, thank you, Desiree, for having us. You went above and beyond, and I think this allows us to really advocate for not only nurse anesthetists in our profession, but just the healthcare world in general and all the providers and specialties that have come together and have stepped up during this pandemic. So thank you.
Yeah. Jordi?
Yeah, just a shout out to my wife, kids, parents. It's been tough on them too. Not just, just having a loved one fighting this pandemic has an inherent level of stress. So wouldn't be able to do it without them. Shout out to our colleagues at Sanford Health for all they do. Happy holidays to everybody. And Desiree, thanks very much for having us on your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we want to thank you for listening to Top Med Talk. Monty, myself, and the whole team want to thank all the frontline providers for the incredible work that you are doing right now and that you have done throughout this crazy year of 2020 and this horrible pandemic. So thank you for that. And as Jordi said, thank you to everyone's families, because we know that we couldn't do it without our spouses, our children, our parents. This is it's been hard on everybody. So we appreciate all the love and support for sure. We also want to thank the AANA for their generous support of our podcast today. It's been a wonderful partnership, and we've had amazing conversations with CRNA providers all over the country. So thanks again for all the support. And thanks again for listening. You can find us on your favorite social media platform. If you like the conversation, please be sure to share with your friends and your healthcare colleagues. Remember, Top Med Talk is a free global medical education podcast. Happy holidays and be safe out there, everyone. Cheers.
Top Med Talk. Thanks for downloading Top Med Talk. Don't forget to subscribe via your podcatcher. Don't forget to check us out on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And also, don't forget, Top Med Talk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. We'd love you to find out more about that. If you check out ebpom.org, you can find low prices on some of the conferences we're organising around the world. Many of them are virtual and don't even involve you leaving your own home. Check out ebpom.org now.